My name is Lauren Hall, and if you're listening to me now, it's because I need to tell the truth. Not the polite version people whisper about in church pews or the sugar-coated lies neighbors spread over coffee, but the truth I've carried alone for far too long. I never thought my own mother would become my worst enemy, but life has a cruel way of peeling back illusions when you least expect it. For as long as I can remember, my mother, Evelyn Hall, has been adored in our little town. She's the woman who always wore pressed clothes, smiled at strangers, and hosted dinners people scrambled to be invited to. To outsiders, she was elegance, order, and control. To me, she was a storm in human form. Her voice could slice through me sharper than the winter wind. Her eyes never softened, even when I begged for a crumb of affection. I grew up in her shadow, and in her shadow there was no warmth. My father? Well, he was just a ghost in photographs. He left when I was young. Or at least, that's what she told me. Whenever I asked questions about him, she shut me down with a glare that promised punishment if I dared ask again. Over time, I stopped asking. But deep down, the silence around his name grew into a wound that never healed. Still, people loved Evelyn. They thought she was a saint for raising a daughter all by herself. I was the quiet, awkward girl trailing behind her. Too small to be noticed, too insignificant to be defended. People saw her shine and ignored my shadows. That's how it always was. That's how it would have stayed, if not for what happened on that night. I want you to understand something before I go on. This isn't just a story of cruelty. This isn't just about a mother's coldness. This is about betrayal so deep it cracked open everything I thought I knew about family. It's about revenge. But to get there, I have to start with the night it all came undone. That night, the snow fell thicker than I'd ever seen. The storm howled through the trees like wolves, and the world outside turned white and merciless. Inside, my mother's eyes burned with something darker than the storm itself. We fought over something small, something that shouldn't have mattered. But with her, everything was a battle. And then she did the unthinkable. She shoved me outside, slammed the door, and turned the lock. That was the moment I realized just how disposable I was to her, and that's where I'll place the words that have haunted me ever since. The memory I want burned into your mind the way it's burned into mine. The night my own mother locked me outside in the freezing storm, I thought I wouldn't survive. My hands were numb, my breath heavy, and all I could think was, why would she do this to me? But then a stranger opened their door. What they told me about my mother shattered everything I believed about her. Even now, remembering those moments makes my chest tighten. The sting of ice on my cheeks, the panic in my lungs, the pounding question, why? Why would a mother do that to her child? But Evelyn wasn't just a cruel mother. She was something far worse. Something hidden beneath years of secrets, lies, and manipulation. That night should have been my ending, but instead it became my beginning. I didn't just survive the storm, I stumbled into the truth that would fuel me. She thought she could leave me out in the cold to die. What she didn't know was that night would be the beginning of her downfall. The day before the storm began like any other in my mother's house. Tense, quiet, and thick with the kind of silence that pressed down on your chest like a weight. Evelyn had rules for everything. Rules about how I folded laundry, how I stacked the dishes, even how I walked across the floor. Quiet feet, she always said. A proper woman doesn't stomp around. I learned early that in her house, breathing too loudly could spark her temper. That morning, I made the mistake of lingering too long in her study. It wasn't really a study, just a cramped room filled with neatly labeled boxes, photo albums, and the heavy oak desk she polished more than she used. I had gone in there to fetch a notebook for myself, but my eyes strayed, as they always did, to the locked drawer on the left side of her desk. The drawer had been locked my entire life. And like any locked thing in a controlling household, it held a gravitational pull. My father's name was never spoken, but sometimes when Evelyn was distracted, I thought I heard her whispering to herself while flipping through papers from that drawer. That morning, though, the drawer wasn't fully closed. Maybe she had been careless. Maybe it was fate. Either way, I saw a sliver of yellowing paper peeking out. Curiosity tugged at me, and before I could talk myself out of it, I pulled gently at the corner. A photograph slipped free. It wasn't large, just an old Polaroid, the kind that fades over time. The image was grainy, but I recognized my father instantly. His eyes, my eyes, stared back at me, softer and kinder than Evelyn's could ever be. And he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man I didn't know, broad-shouldered, smiling, his arms slung around my father's shoulder like they were old friends. The strange thing was the caption on the back, written in Evelyn's sharp handwriting, "Keep this hidden." Before I could study it further, the air shifted. "Lauren." My mother's voice cracked through the silence like a whip. I jumped, nearly dropping the photo. She stood in the doorway, her eyes sharp and hard as glass. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, then at the photograph in my hand, and the color drained from her face. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. I was just... My words fumbled, clumsy with guilt. "I saw the paper sticking out. You had no right." She snatched the photograph from me with such force that my fingers stung. She tucked it back into the drawer and slammed it shut. "You will never go through my things again. Do you understand me?" I nodded quickly, my heart hammering, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough for her. Her anger flared like fire catching dry leaves, always snooping, always prying into things that don't concern you. "Do you think I don't see the way you look at me? Like I owe you something? Like you deserve answers?" Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. Showing weakness only fed her cruelty. I began. "Enough." She cut me off, her voice rising until it filled the room. "Get out of my sight." Her words landed with finality. There was no point arguing, no point explaining. When Evelyn Hall said something, it was law. I backed out of the room, my stomach tight, my thoughts tangled, but the photograph lingered in my mind. My father, alive and smiling, standing with a man I didn't know. And that strange commanding note, "Keep this hidden." Hidden from who? From me? From the town? From someone else entirely? That evening, Evelyn carried herself as though nothing had happened. She moved through the house with her usual icy grace, cooking dinner in silence, sipping her wine as though her outburst hadn't rattled the walls. That was her way. Eruptions of fury followed by calculated calm, leaving me questioning whether the storm had been real at all. But I couldn't let it go. Every clink of her fork against her plate, every glance in my direction felt loaded with unspoken words. She was afraid I'd seen too much. She was afraid of something. I told myself I'd let it drop, that I'd bury the questions like I always did. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the image of my father's smile and that stranger's arm around him burned into me. I didn't know it yet, but that night she would decide to erase me completely. The storm arrived like a living thing, clawing at the windows, rattling the roof, howling down the chimney until it felt like the whole house was shivering. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, staring out at the whiteness that swallowed the world, and wondering if I'd ever seen the sky so heavy, so merciless. The snow fell sideways, driven by wind that screeched like a warning. Evelyn didn't look worried. She never did. She sat at the dining table, her wine glass poised in her hand, eyes sharp as she flipped through a magazine. The storm could have torn the roof away and she would have still sat there untouched, as if chaos had no right to touch her. "Don't linger," she said suddenly without looking at me. "You're breathing on the glass. It fogs it up." Her words carried no weight to anyone else, but to me, they were sparks on dry kindling. All day, the memory of that photograph gnawed at me. I hadn't spoken of it, but she knew I hadn't forgotten. I could feel her watching me out of the corner of her eye, daring me to bring it up, daring me to challenge her. I didn't. Instead, I dried the dishes too slowly, too loudly maybe. And that was all it took. "What's that face for?" she asked, slamming the magazine shut. "I don't have a face," I muttered. Her chair scraped against the tile as she stood. "Don't play stupid with me. You've been sulking all day. You think I don't notice?" The storm outside was nothing compared to the one rising in her. My voice cracked. "I just want to know why there's a picture of Dad in your desk, with someone I've never seen before. Why keep it hidden?" Her lips pressed thin, her jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought she'd slap me. Instead, she smiled, the cruel kind, the one that made my stomach drop. "Still digging, aren't you? You can't leave well enough alone. You always have to drag the past into things." She stepped closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "He left us, Lauren. He didn't care enough to stay. That's all you need to know." "That's not true." The words slipped out before I could stop them. He looked happy in that picture. "Happier than I've ever seen you." Her eyes flared. And then, in a voice as cold as the wind outside, she said, "Get out." I blinked at her. "What?" "Out of my sight. Out of this house. I don't care where. Just go." I thought she was bluffing. Evelyn loved her control too much to let me out of her reach, but when I didn't move, her hand shot out, grabbing my arm with a strength that shocked me. She yanked me toward the door, her nails digging into my skin through my sweater. "Mom, wait." The front door flew open, and the storm roared inside like it had been waiting. Snow blasted against my face, needles of ice that stung my skin. Before I could resist, she shoved me out. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut was her face. Cold, composed, satisfied. Then the lock clicked. I screamed her name, pounded on the door with both fists, begged until my throat burned. "Mom, please, let me in. It's freezing. I'll get sick. I'll die out here." Nothing. Not a sound from the other side. At first, adrenaline kept me moving. I circled the porch, rattled windows, tried the back door. But every entry was locked, every curtain drawn tight. My own house, the only home I'd ever known, had rejected me. The cold sank in quickly. My fingers lost feeling first, then my nose, my ears. Each breath came out in painful bursts of steam. The snow was already past my ankles, dragging me down with every step. I shouted again, but the storm swallowed my voice. Minutes stretched into something longer, heavier. My hands turned useless, my legs wooden. The sharp panic dulled into a foggy confusion. I pressed my palms to the windows, praying she'd see, praying she'd remember I was hers. But the house stayed dark, silent. The wind howled, mocking me. The snow clung to my lashes until the world blurred white. My body shook violently, but inside I was already going numb. I stumbled off the porch, half blind, half mad with desperation. Somewhere, anywhere, there had to be light, warmth, someone who would help. My boots sank deep, my knees buckling as I fought through the drifts. Every step was slower than the last. Thoughts spiraled. Maybe she wanted me gone forever. Maybe this was her answer to every question I'd ever asked about my father. Maybe she decided that night I was nothing but dead weight. The wind knocked me down, the snow cradling me like a grave. I coughed, gasped, tried to rise, but my body betrayed me. My lungs burned, my skin burned, and then everything stopped burning at all. The world was silent except for the storm. My eyelids grew heavy. Somewhere in the haze of snow, I thought I saw a light flickering, faint and far away. Maybe it was real. Maybe just the last trick of a dying brain. I remember the moment I collapsed in the snow, whispering goodbye to myself. When I woke, I thought I had died. The first thing I felt wasn't pain or cold. It was warmth. A thick quilt pressed around me, heavy and comforting, like arms that refused to let me slip away. My skin burned where it thawed, pins and needles stabbing life back into my fingers and toes. A fire crackled nearby, its orange glow painting the ceiling beams above me. I blinked, disoriented. The last thing I remembered was the snow swallowing me whole, my body surrendering. Yet here I was, alive, breathing. "Easy," a man's voice said from somewhere behind me. Low, calm, not unkind. I turned my head. A man sat in a chair near the fireplace, watching me. He was maybe in his late 40s, with broad shoulders, and a face carved by years of weather and silence. His flannel shirt was rolled at the sleeves, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes sharp but unreadable. Where am I? My voice rasped, raw from the cold and the screaming I'd done at my mother's door. "My cabin," he said simply. "Found you half buried in the snow not 100 yards from here. Another hour and you wouldn't have made it." I swallowed hard, the reality of it hitting me. He'd saved my life. A stranger. Not my mother, not anyone who should have cared. A stranger. "Thank you," I whispered, pulling the blanket tighter. My clothes had been changed, replaced with a long flannel shirt that hung down to my knees. Panic flickered across my face because he noticed and added quickly, "Don't worry, I didn't touch you. Just got you out of the wet things before they froze to you." I nodded, though my cheeks burned with embarrassment. He'd done what was necessary. Still, there was something about his watchfulness that made me uneasy. Not predatory, but expectant. "My name's Daniel," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "Daniel Reeves." "Lauren," I murmured, hesitating before giving him my last name. "Lauren Hall." His eyes flickered, just for a moment, as though the name struck a chord. Then he masked it, nodding as though nothing had passed between us. "You're Evelyn Hall's girl," he said, finally. I froze. The sound of her name from his lips was like ice water down my spine. You know my mother?" Something in his gaze sharpened. "Everyone around here knows Evelyn." That wasn't true. We lived on the edge of town, and Evelyn guarded her privacy like a dragon hoards treasure. She had acquaintances, sure, but friends, none that I ever saw. And yet this man, this solitary stranger, spoke her name like he carried a history with it. I forced a small, polite smile, but my mind spun. Gratitude warred with suspicion. Why did he look at me as though I'd walked straight out of a story he already knew the ending to? Rest, Daniel said, standing and poking at the fire. Your body needs time to recover. I'll make you some broth. He moved with a quiet certainty, his back broad in the firelight. I should have felt safe. I should have felt relief. But instead, every nerve in my body hummed with unease. I thought of my mother's face when she shoved me into the storm. Calm, almost smug. And now here was a man who seemed to know her better than I ever had. When he returned with the broth, steam curling from the bowl, I asked softly, "Why were you out there? In the storm?" He set the bowl on the table beside me. "I wasn't. I heard you calling before you collapsed." My throat tightened. So I hadn't imagined that flicker of light in the distance. If you hadn't, you'd be gone. He didn't say it cruelly, just as a fact. I sipped the broth, the warmth sliding into me, bringing life back to the hollow places. But Daniel didn't stop watching me. Not with suspicion, but with the weight of someone holding back words too heavy to drop casually. Finally, I set the bowl down. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" For a moment, silence. The fire popped. The storm outside rattled the windows. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and steady. "Because, Lauren," he said, "I have to tell you something about your mother. Something she's hidden from you your whole life." The spoon clattered from my hand. "What do you mean?" My voice came out thin, barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. His eyes held mine, heavy with something I couldn't name. And in that pause, in that awful stretch of silence, my heart pounded with one thought. Whatever truth he was about to reveal, it was worse than anything I'd imagined. The fire crackled between us, throwing shadows across Daniel's face. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at me with a heaviness that made my stomach knot. "Your mother," he began slowly, "isn't who you think she is." I laughed softly, bitterly. "You don't have to tell me that. She just left me to freeze to death outside our house. I think I've got the picture." He didn't smile. "No, Lauren. What she did tonight is only the surface. There are things about Evelyn, things she's kept hidden for decades. And I know, because once I was one of the people she destroyed." My pulse jumped. "Destroyed? What are you talking about?" He dragged a hand over his face, as though pulling the words out was painful. Then he fixed me with eyes that didn't waver. 15 years ago, I had a life. A wife. A little boy who thought the world of me. I worked at the bank in town. Good job, good reputation. I thought I was untouchable. Then Evelyn Hall decided I was in her way. My throat tightened. In her way of what? Her rise, he said flatly. Back then she was clawing her way up. Trying to marry money, status, get herself into the right social circles. She couldn't afford to let anyone stand in her path. And I, stupidly, knew too much about her. I hugged the quilt tighter around me. "What did you know?" Daniel's eyes flickered toward the fire. That she was stealing. Not money, not yet, but favors, influence, twisting things at the bank to her advantage. I caught her once. I told her to stop, that she'd ruin people. She smiled at me, the way she probably smiles at you when she's already decided what she's going to do. My stomach dropped. I knew that smile. I hated that smile. "She framed me," Daniel said, his voice dark. "Cooked the books, planted papers in my office." By the time I realized it was too late. The police came for me in the middle of the night. My wife's face, God, I'll never forget how she looked at me when they dragged me out. Like she didn't know me anymore. He paused, his jaw tightening. For the first time, I saw not just hardness in him, but grief. Old grief that still bled. I went to prison, Lauren. 2 years. My wife divorced me. She took my son and left. I haven't seen him since. The air in the cabin felt thinner, tighter. I pressed a hand to my chest. "And you're saying my mother did that to you? Just to keep climbing?" "She'd do anything to protect herself," Daniel said. "Anything." I shook my head, though not because I didn't believe him. A part of me did, immediately, instinctively. But why tell me? Why now? His eyes softened just a little. "Because you deserve to know what kind of woman she is. You deserve the truth. And because He hesitated, like he was stepping across a line he couldn't uncross. Because what she did to me isn't the only lie she's built her life on. A chill that had nothing to do with the storm crawled through me. What do you mean? He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Your father. I held my breath. All your life she's told you he abandoned you, that he didn't care, that he left you both to start over somewhere else. My lips trembled. Yes, it isn't true, Daniel said. His words fell like stones in the silence. Your father never abandoned you. He loved you. He fought to stay in your life. But Evelyn, she drove him away. She told lies, spun stories, turned everyone against him. She made sure you never heard from him again. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the quilt, clutching it like it might anchor me. You're lying, I whispered, though my voice was weak. Why would she do that? Because he knew too much about her, about what she was willing to do to get what she wanted. Daniel's gaze darkened. And I'll tell you something else, though I can't prove it. I don't think she just drove him away. I think she made sure he could never come back. My breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying there are whispers. He didn't just disappear. He had an accident, or at least that's what people were told. But I've looked into it. The pieces don't add up. And with Evelyn, accidents are rarely accidents. The air around me thickened. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was wrong, but deep down I knew he wasn't. I'd always felt it. That hole in my life, that ache when I looked at the one picture I had of my father. He hadn't left me. She had stolen him from me. The woman who gave me life had taken everything else. My throat closed up. Tears blurred my vision. I always thought maybe he just didn't want me. That I wasn't enough to keep him. That's what she made me believe. Daniel's voice softened. That was her cruelty, not his truth. I pressed my face into my hands. The storm outside raged, but the real storm was inside me now. My whole world had cracked open. Every memory of my mother, every word she'd spoken, every story she'd told me, it all twisted into something poisonous. I looked up at Daniel through the tears, my voice raw. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let me live in the lie? Because, he said firmly, the truth will set you free. And because, if you don't see her for what she really is, she'll keep destroying you. The way she destroyed me. The way she destroyed your father. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. I sat there, trembling, breathing like my lungs had forgotten how. And then, something shifted inside me. Not grief, not just anger, but something sharper. Resolve. I wiped the tears from my cheeks and looked Daniel straight in the eye. My voice came out low, steady, like it belonged to someone else. If all of this is true, I whispered, I can't just walk away. She needs to pay. Daniel didn't flinch. He just nodded, as though he'd been waiting for me to say it all along. I lay awake that night in Daniel's cabin, staring at the ceiling while the fire hissed low in the hearth. Sleep wouldn't come, not after everything he'd told me. His words had cracked something wide open inside me, and once it split, memories poured through. Memories I had buried. Memories I had explained away. Memories I had forgiven. I thought of the first time I realized my mother's love came with conditions. I must have been 6. I had drawn her a picture in kindergarten, 2 stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. Me and Mommy, I'd written in crooked letters at the bottom. I'd run home so proud, holding it out like treasure. She glanced at it once and said, "Why is the sun so big? That's not how it looks. And you misspelled Mommy. Do it again. No smile. No hug. Just dismissal." I remember clutching the crayon paper in my small hands, trying not to cry. That night, I drew it again, desperate to get it right. At the time, I told myself she wanted me to be better. Now, with Daniel's revelations echoing in my head, I saw it differently. She didn't want me better. She wanted me small, dependent, never enough. Another memory clawed its way forward. I was 12, wearing a dress I loved. A hand-me-down from a neighbor, pale blue with little white flowers. We were at the grocery store when Evelyn stopped in the middle of the aisle, looked me up and down, and said loudly, "You look ridiculous. Like a charity case. Everyone probably thinks I can't afford to dress my own daughter." Shoppers had turned their heads. My face burned hotter than fire. I wanted to disappear. Evelyn smiled, satisfied with her cruelty, and marched me out of the store. Back then, I thought she was embarrassed by me. Now I understood she wasn't embarrassed. She was making sure I knew who held the power. Public humiliation was just another tool in her arsenal. And then there was the guilt. God, the guilt. At 14, I'd been invited to a sleepover with the only friend I had, Emily. When I asked if I could go, Evelyn looked at me with those icy eyes and said, "So you'd rather be with strangers than your own mother? After all I've sacrificed for you?" I remember shrinking, apologizing, begging her not to be mad. She let me twist in that shame for a while before saying, "Fine, go. But don't expect me to be here waiting up all night for you." I didn't go. I sat in my room, staring at the walls, listening to her footsteps downstairs. She'd won again, and yet even then I kept forgiving her. Every cold word, every sharp look, every time she twisted the knife, I told myself, she's my mother. She loves me in her own way, but lying there in Daniel's cabin, I saw those moments for what they truly were. Calculated acts of control. She hadn't loved me, not really. She had needed me weak so she could feel strong. The worst memory came last. I was 17, standing on the porch after my father's old coworker stopped by. He'd asked if we'd heard from him. I remember the hope that had lit in my chest, a fragile spark. Maybe he still cared. Maybe he wanted to find me. When I turned to Evelyn, she had shut it down with one cutting sentence. "Your father doesn't think about you. He never did. Stop clinging to someone who never wanted us." I had believed her. I had swallowed that poison whole. Now I knew better. He hadn't abandoned me. She had stolen him. Stolen his presence, his love, his truth. She had raised me in lies, stripped me of every scrap of hope, and called it motherhood. The fire popped. My nails dug into the quilt as rage surged through me. I thought of her face the night she shoved me into the storm. Calm, smug, as if she'd finally rid herself of a burden. But she was wrong. She hadn't rid herself of me. She'd created something else entirely. I whispered into the dark, my voice shaking but certain. I had spent years forgiving her. That night, I stopped forgiving. The storm passed, but something inside me didn't. By morning, the world outside Daniel's cabin was buried under white silence. The trees bent under the weight, and the road vanished into a smooth, endless drift. Everything looked clean, pure, like nothing bad had ever happened here. But I knew better. I knew snow could hide blood just as easily as footprints. Daniel poured us coffee in chipped mugs. He set one in front of me, studying my face like he was searching for cracks. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" I asked. "Not really?" He sat opposite me. For a long moment, he just watched the steam curl between us. Then he said, "I need to ask you something, Lauren. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I stiffened. "What road?" "The one you hinted at last night. Revenge." His voice was calm but heavy. "If you do this, it won't stop. It won't be clean. You'll dig and dig until there's nothing left of her. Or you. You think you're in control, but revenge has a way of consuming everything." I looked him straight in the eye. "She tried to kill me, Daniel. She stole my father from me. She's been destroying people for decades. If I walk away now, then she wins." Again, he leaned back, jaw tight. "You sound just like I did once. Before it all fell apart." "Maybe it needs to fall apart," I snapped, then softened. "I can't keep living as her victim. I need the truth. And once I have it, I'll decide what to do with it." Daniel didn't argue further. He just nodded, resigned. "Then you'll need proof. Not stories. Not suspicions. Something concrete." I sipped the bitter coffee, letting his words sink in. Proof. Evidence. Something she couldn't twist or deny. That's when the plan started forming. I began by asking questions. Quietly, carefully. Daniel drove me into town once the roads were cleared, and while he bought supplies, I slipped into places Evelyn thought I'd never dare to show my face. At the bakery, I lingered by the counter, chatting with Mrs. Dunbar, who had known my mother since high school. Her smile was warm until I asked, "Did you ever know my father well?" The change was instant. Her lips pressed into a line. "Your mother doesn't like to talk about him." "I know," I said, lowering my voice, "but I want to understand. Did he really leave us?" Mrs. Dunbar glanced around, then whispered, "He loved you. That much I remember. Always carrying you on his shoulders, showing you off like you were his whole world." She paused. "But one day, gone, just like that. Your mother told everyone he was unreliable, that she'd been forced to carry the family herself. And well," she sighed, "people believed her. It was easier than asking questions. Easier than asking questions." That phrase clung to me like ice. At the library, I searched old newspapers, finding faint traces of Evelyn's rise, community events, charity galas, smiling photos that showed her as a woman of class and generosity. The town adored her. No one had wanted to see the cracks. Back at Daniel's cabin, I combed through every memory, every word she'd thrown at me like a weapon, searching for threads to pull. Each time I thought about stopping, I remembered the storm, the sound of the lock clicking, the silence on the other side of the door. I couldn't stop. Not now. One afternoon, I returned to the house. The snow had melted from the roof, but the walls looked darker somehow, heavier. My stomach twisted as I slipped the spare key from the flower pot, something Evelyn must have forgotten I knew about. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner and wine. The same silence pressed against me, but now I saw the house differently. Not as a home, but as a stage. Every vase, every polished picture frame, every carefully chosen rug. It was all set dressing for the role Evelyn played. I moved quickly, my heart thudding. Her desk was my target. The same one where I'd glimpsed that photograph. I rifled through drawers, finding bills, letters from charity committees, to-do lists written in her sharp, perfect handwriting. Nothing unusual, until the bottom drawer. Locked. I crouched, my fingers shaking as I tugged. No use. Then I remembered how she used to hide keys in strange places. Under the lining of her jewelry box, in the hollow of a candlestick. My eyes scanned the room, and there it was. A small brass key taped beneath the drawer. I unlocked it. Inside lay a stack of papers bound by a ribbon. Old yellowing envelopes, their edges curled. My heart jumped as I read the first sender's name scrawled across the front. David Hall, my father. My hands trembled as I pulled one out. The ink had faded, but the words still burned. Lauren, my little girl. I don't know if your mother will ever let you read this, but I need you to know. I never left you. I never stopped loving you. I am fighting every day to see you again. Please don't believe the lies. The letters slipped through my fingers, scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. He hadn't left. He had written. He had fought. And she, Evelyn, had hidden it all. My knees gave out and I collapsed onto the carpet, clutching one letter to my chest. Tears blurred the ink as rage surged through me, sharper than ever before. I whispered into the empty room, the words tasting like fire. This is the proof. This is how I'll destroy her. I sat with my father's letters spread across Daniel's table, the yellowed paper glowing in the firelight. Each word was a knife carving open years of lies. Each signature, "Love, Dad," was proof that Evelyn had built my whole life on a foundation of poison. For hours, I cried, then raged, then stared blankly at the wall until Daniel touched my shoulder. You can't keep this inside. You have to face her. He was right. So I did. The next morning, I walked into my mother's house with the bundle of letters clutched tight in my hand. The silence wrapped around me, thick and suffocating. She was in the kitchen, arranging roses in a vase like nothing in the world could ever touch her. When she turned and saw me, her painted smile faltered. "Lauren," her voice was clipped. "I didn't hear you come in." "Maybe you weren't listening." My voice was steadier than I felt. Her eyes flicked to the papers in my hands. And for a split second, something passed over her face. Recognition. Maybe fear, but then it was gone. Her mask slipped back into place. "What are those?" she asked, feigning disinterest. "Letters," I said, laying them on the counter. "From Dad, all the ones you hid from me," she froze. Just for a moment. Then she laughed, light and dismissive. "Oh, Lauren, you think you've uncovered some great secret? Those were worthless scraps. He was worthless. He abandoned us." "No," I said firmly, my chest tightening. "He loved me. He fought for me." "You took that from me," her expression hardened. "You were a child. You don't understand how weak he was. He couldn't provide, couldn't commit. He would have destroyed us. I did what had to be done." I slammed my hand on the counter, the letters rattling under my palm. "You destroyed him. And you almost destroyed me." Her nostrils flared. For the first time, the calm cracked, and a hint of venom seeped through. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By dredging up the past?" I stared at her. "Done for me? You locked me out in a storm. You've spent my entire life tearing me down. Don't you dare pretend it was love." Her smile was gone now. Her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. And then, in a voice low and sharp, she said the words that made my blood run cold. "Your father never left because he wanted to. I made sure he couldn't stay. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? I told him lies, she said with cruel satisfaction. That you didn't need him. That he was a burden. And when that wasn't enough, I spread rumors. Made him look unstable, dangerous. No one wanted to be near him, not even the law. It was the only way to protect my reputation, to build something for us. He would have dragged us down. My hands shook as I clutched the counter. You ruined him, her eyes glittered. I saved us. And Daniel Reeves? I demanded, my throat raw. What about him? A shadow crossed her face, but then she straightened, her chin lifting. He was a problem. He asked too many questions. He knew things he shouldn't have. So I made sure no one would ever believe him. He was convenient to sacrifice. The room spun. Her words, her pride, her utter lack of remorse, it was all too much. You ruined 2 men's lives to protect yourself? I whispered. And you expect me to thank you for it? She stepped closer, her voice soft but sharp as glass. I expect you to understand. You're mine, Lauren. Everything you have is because of me. You think you can survive without me? You're nothing without me. The old Lauren, the scared, silenced little girl, might have believed her. But not anymore. I looked her straight in the eye, my heart pounding with a new, dangerous clarity. She thought she still held the strings, still had the power to twist my world into submission. But I wasn't her puppet anymore. In my mind, I said the words I wasn't ready to speak aloud yet. She had no idea I was about to take everything from her. I used to believe revenge was a single act, a decisive blow, a moment where everything snapped into place and you felt free. But it isn't. It's a slow burn, 1,000 small cuts delivered with patience. It's watching someone who thought themselves untouchable lose peace. After peace until there's nothing left. That's what I learned in the weeks after confronting my mother. The night I walked out of her house, my hands shaking from rage. Daniel was waiting in his truck down the street. He didn't say a word as I climbed in. We drove in silence, the only sound the crunch of snow under the tires. At last he spoke. You're sure you want to do this? I stared at him. She's ruined lives, Daniel. She ruined you. She ruined my father. And she almost destroyed me. She can't get away with it anymore. He nodded slowly. Then you need to be smart. This town worships her. But worship can turn into hatred overnight, if you give them the right reasons. So I began my work. First, I organized the evidence. The letters from my father, the court documents Daniel still had from his case, the ones showing how key witnesses had been persuaded to testify against him, copies of old financial records linking Evelyn to bribes and payoffs, newspaper clippings with suspiciously glowing articles about her community projects written by anonymous donors, Evelyn herself. Every night, I sat at Daniel's old kitchen table with piles of papers and a laptop, scanning, compiling, cross-referencing. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years, my old teachers, my father's friends, even the quiet neighbors who always seemed to know more than they said. And little by little, the puzzle came together. But information alone wouldn't be enough. Evelyn's power was in her reputation. She had crafted an image so flawless that truth would bounce off her unless I hit her in the heart of her empire, the town's trust. So I started with whispers. Aeneas leaked a few documents anonymously, a letter to the local paper hinting at ethical concerns about Evelyn Hall's past charity work, a scanned court transcript showing Daniel's trial and how the key evidence had mysteriously vanished, a redacted bank record revealing Evelyn's donations to local officials. Nothing that screamed guilty at first, just enough to plant doubt. And it worked. By the second week, the same people who once praised her at the grocery store were pausing before greeting her. Old friends stopped returning her calls. Her book club shrank. Her smile, once an effortless mask, began to look strained. But I wasn't finished. Next, I began contacting the people Evelyn had deceived directly. I met with Mrs. Parker, the former treasurer of one of Evelyn's committees. She admitted she'd seen money vanish, but had been too afraid to speak. I found Mr. Riggs, a retired attorney, who confessed he'd been pressured into signing off on a fraudulent document for Evelyn decades ago. Each meeting gave me another piece of the weapon I was building. Then I used social media. I created an anonymous account, posted evidence, asked questions, let the townspeople connect the dots themselves. Screenshots of bank records, snippets of my father's letters, where he begged to see me. Quotes from Daniel's trial. Within days, the account went viral in our small town. People who once would have defended Evelyn without question were now tagging one another in my posts, saying, "Did you see this? Could it be true?" It was like watching a crack spread through ice. At first tiny, then faster, until the whole surface began to shatter. Finally, I made my move in person. Evelyn was hosting her annual Winter Hearts Gala, the event she prided herself on, where town leaders and donors gathered to bask in her glow. I walked in uninvited, wearing my father's old silver locket. The chatter stopped when they saw me. "Lauren," Evelyn said from the podium, her voice trembling just enough for me to notice. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to tell the truth," I said, stepping up beside her. The crowd shifted, murmured. I opened my bag and pulled out copies of the evidence, letters, bank records, testimonies. I laid them on the podium one by one, my voice rising as I spoke. "For years, you've believed this woman was a saint. She drove my father away with lies. She framed an innocent man, Daniel Reeves, to protect herself. She's stolen, bribed, and manipulated everyone in this room. And she locked her own daughter out in a blizzard to die." The room went silent. Then someone in the crowd, Mrs. Parker, stepped forward. "She's telling the truth," she said, voice shaking. I saw the money disappear. I stayed quiet because I was afraid. Others followed. Mr. Riggs, pale as paper, admitted his part. Even some of Evelyn's closest allies hung their heads. Evelyn tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked like breaking glass. "You're all fools," she hissed. This is my ungrateful daughter trying to destroy me, but the tide had turned. The mayor excused himself. A board member tore off his name tag and walked out. Cameras clicked as people filmed her meltdown. In real time, the woman who had once seemed invincible was unraveling in front of her kingdom. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. Over the next days, Evelyn's life collapsed. She was removed from her committees. Sponsors withdrew from her projects. People whispered when she walked past, "Fraud, liar, monster." Neighbors closed their curtains when she passed their houses. The police reopened Daniel's case. My father's letters became public record, and Evelyn, the woman who locked me out in the cold, now found herself locked out by everyone else. One night, I drove past her house. The lights were off. The yard was unkempt. The roses she once fussed over had withered under the frost. Through the window, I saw her sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. No one called. No one visited. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? To make her pay? To make her feel even a fraction of the isolation she had forced on me. And yet as I watched her crumble, my chest felt heavier, not lighter. I had taken her power. I had burned her mask. But I couldn't burn away the years she had stolen from me. As I drove off, the thought came unbidden, soft but relentless. I thought watching her fall would make me feel lighter. But revenge has its own weight. When the storm of my revenge finally quieted, what remained was silence. Not the kind that comforts you, but the kind that makes you realize just how much has been lost. Evelyn Hall, the woman who once commanded every room she entered, who stood on pedestals built of lies and praise, was now nothing more than a shadow in her own home. Her reputation, her allies, her flawless mask, all gone. The town that once adored her had turned its back. She walked the streets alone now, head lowered, clutching her coat as whispers followed her. People she used to rule with her charm crossed the street when she approached. I had seen the curtain pulled back, but now the entire community had too. And yet, she was still alive. I hadn't killed her, but I had killed something far greater than flesh and bone. I had killed her power. The thing she had used like a weapon against me, against my father, against Daniel, against anyone who dared to stand in her way. And for the first time in my life, I knew she could never control me again. There were nights when I lay awake, thinking about my father. His letters, his words, the love he tried to send me through ink and paper, all stolen by her, somewhere out there. Maybe he was still alive, still waiting for a chance to be heard. Or maybe he was gone, buried with the truth I'd only just uncovered. Either way, I made myself a promise. I would try to find him. I owed him that much. And I owed myself the chance to know the man Evelyn had stolen from me. As for Daniel, he became something like a quiet mentor in the months that followed. We didn't need to speak often. Sometimes, just sitting in his cabin by the fire was enough. There was a bond between us, not because we were family, but because we had both been casualties of Evelyn's hunger for power. He gave me advice when I needed it, but he never tried to steer my choices. "Your path is your own, Lauren," he told me once, sipping his coffee. I lost everything to your mother because I let her dictate who I was. Don't let revenge become the only thing that defines you now. Build something better. Those words stuck, because in the quiet after revenge, I realized something important. Destruction may feel like justice, but it doesn't give you back the years you've lost. It doesn't warm the cold nights or rewrite the childhood you never had. Revenge is a fire and it burns your enemy, yes, but it leaves you with ashes, too. Still, I didn't regret what I'd done. Evelyn needed to fall, and I needed to be the one who pushed her. I drive past her house sometimes, and every time it looks smaller. She sits alone by the window, staring out at a town that no longer worships her. Sometimes our eyes meet, and for just a second, I see a flicker of the old Evelyn. The pride, the fury, but then it fades, and she's left with nothing but herself. I don't smile. I don't wave. I just keep driving, because she doesn't deserve a reaction from me anymore. Looking back, I know my story isn't unique. Too many people have mothers or fathers who fail them, who betray them, who silence them. Too many of us grow up believing we're alone in that silence, that we're weak. That maybe we even deserve it. But we don't. I don't, and neither do you. So if you've listened to my story this far, thank you. Stories like mine deserve to be heard. If you've ever felt betrayed, abandoned, or silenced, you know why I had to share this. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because silence is what people like Evelyn count on, and silence is the one thing I'll never give her again.